Credit cards or debit cards? Which is better? That's a great question and exactly what we're going to be talking about right here in the video, so let's get right into it. Alright, so the big question comes in, credit cards or debit cards? Which of these types of cards should we really be using? Well, before we can answer that question, we first need to ask ourselves, what is our objective? Because based on our objective, in some instances we may choose to use a credit card, and in other instances we may choose to use a debit card. So let's get into it and discuss all the details and also talk about the differences between these two types of cards, why you may choose one versus the other, and the benefits of using one versus the other in certain instances. We have a lot to talk about here in the video. Let's get right into it. All right, so first off, let's quickly talk about credit cards. As we all know, you apply for a credit card in order to get one, right? You fill out an application, and all of a sudden, if you're approved, they send out the card to you, and within a matter of a couple days, you have it in your possession with a credit line, and they basically say, hey, have fun, pay us back when you can, and oh, by the way, as you continue to spend all that money, we're going to charge you about 20% interest along the way. So that's basically the full idea behind credit cards. Now, when it comes down to debit cards, what are these and how do they compare to credit cards? A debit card is basically issued from your bank. So if you have a checking account or maybe a savings account at your local bank, you can basically just call them up, or you can walk in and say, hey, I have a savings account with you. Can you issue me a debit card? And they say, sure, no problem. We'll have it out to you in 3 days. So you do not need to apply for debit cards, but rather it is directly linked to your actual bank account. Whether it happens to be a checking account, a savings account, whatever it happens to be, this is where debit cards are now coming from. Okay, now I think we all basically understand the differences between credit cards and debit cards. And again, both of these are very, very nice products to have, but again, they both have their places probably in your wallet or your purse, right? Now again, in some instances, you may choose to use your credit card and or your debit card. So now let's quickly talk about why you may choose one versus the other. Here's what it comes down to. Like I just mentioned, credit cards, they basically send you the card with a credit line. So in some instances, the credit line might be $1,000. It could be $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $50,000, maybe even $100,000 in some instances. And again, the credit line simply says the bank is allowing you to spend up to that amount. And then again, like I said, pay it back as you can, but by the way, we're going to charge you some pretty hefty interest along the way. So that's the whole idea behind a credit card. But again, remember, with the debit card, you can only spend up to the amount of money that is in your bank account at that time. Now again, in some instances, you can probably spend more than what you actually have in your bank account, but then you're going to see a big old negative and probably some overdraft fees as well. So you probably don't want to do that. Or depending on the bank that you have, they're probably just going to reject your purchases because they're going to say, hey, you're trying to buy $20 worth of stuff and you only have $13. I'm sorry, you can't do it. We're not going to allow this purchase to go through. So that's generally what happens, and they want to do that to protect you so that you don't overdraft your account. But again, these are some of the things that go along with both of these cards. So in this instance, now let's talk about why you may choose to use one versus the other and what some of the benefits are versus using one over the other. Now here's the thing. When it comes down to it, using a debit card religiously on every single purchase actually allows a person to be way more responsible with their money. Now again, I'm not saying because somebody's using a credit card that they're automatically irresponsible with money. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, to be honest with you, I have 3 credit cards. I do not have a single debit card. I've had debit cards in my life, but I prefer to use credit cards. So in my own personal life, I have 3 credit cards and I use all of them all the time. Depending on what I'm making purchases on, I whip out a different card for depending on different purchases. For example, grocery gets one card, gas gets another card. All kinds of different things get other cards. So that's what I'm saying. In my personal life, I only use credit cards. I have used debit cards, but I don't love them. They're not for me. But again, debit cards are for some people. But here's the difference. When you go out, and again, when you use a debit card, it actually like almost forces you to be financially responsible because you're remembering every time you swipe that card, they are making a withdrawal right out of your account. It is literally your money being pulled directly out of your account. However, when it comes down to a credit card, you feel like, what do I really care? It's somebody else's money. But really, it's actually your money, but you're spending somebody else's money first, and then they're going to send you a bill, and they're going to say, hey, you owe us $1,000. Remember this weekend when you went out to the mall or you went out shopping and you spent all kinds of money on your credit card? Yeah, guess what? Now you owe us that money, right? And if you don't pay it back in its entirety in the first month, then guess what? We're going to slap a 20% interest rate on it, right? So that's kind of the differences between these. Now, obviously, so here's the differences. The reports have actually shown that spending money on a credit card, the average consumer spends between 12 and 18% more when using a credit card versus actual physical cash. However, this same instance almost comes in when it comes down to debit cards because, again, even though a debit card is not actual physical cash right out of your pocket or your purse or your wallet, it's virtually the same thing when it comes down to the mindset of spending that money, because even though you're sliding the plastic, at the end of the day, you're going to go back and look at your bank account and all of a sudden see negative $20, negative $75, negative $150, negative $23, negative $122. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden you're going to look at that and think, whoa, what was going on here, right? But when you go to your credit card statement and you look at it, you think, whatever, I have a $10,000 credit line, and guess what? I spent $1,000 of it. I still have $9,000 to go, right? Let's go at it, right? So it's easy to continue spending on a credit card, whereas with a debit card, you continue to look at your account and you see those negatives coming in, and it's not very fun, right? It's not a fun experience to continue looking at all those negatives coming into your account. All right, so when it comes down to it, the mindset of using a credit card, it's way easier to spend more money that maybe some of us don't have in the event that we're using a credit card versus an actual debit card. It's it's a little bit easier to be more financially responsible. And again, I'm not saying that anybody that uses a credit card is not financially responsible, and those people that have a debit card are like uberly responsible with their money. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just simply saying this is what the statistics actually show behind kind of the mindset of using one card versus the other. Now let's quickly talk about some of the perks behind why you may choose to use one or the other. Now for me, I strictly use credit cards because I like the points and the cash back and the rewards and things like this that I'm getting from my cards. Now don't get me wrong, debit cards generally do have some type of reward back as well. Sometimes it's like 1% cash back, 1% rewards back, things like this that you can redeem for other things like statement credits or, just like a little deposit into your account, things like this. So yes, even though debit cards generally do have a little bit of a reward as well, usually it's about 1% back. That's about it on all purchases on a debit card. However, credit cards, again, it could range all over the place. In fact, I have 3 different credit cards. Let me tell you the details behind the 3 that I have, because now you'll see why I use them for different purchases. Okay, so one of them is just a straight up 1.5% cash back on literally every single purchase that I make. That's it, just 1.5% cash back every single purchase, every single day. That's it. So I use that one when I'm not going to some kind of like specialty store, something like that has extra bonus categories. I'm not using that. I simply just use this one for my everyday purchases if there's not some kind of extra additional benefit for using it at using a different type of card. So again, I like that cash back because I can redeem it for either statement credits, cash back. I can use it for like flights if I just want to book some flights with that with my points, or I can use it for gift cards. I can use it for a whole variety of different things. I like to rack up those points, and I like to get a little bit of a reward back on the money that I'm going to be spending anyway. At the end of the day, it's only 1.5%. It's not like anybody's getting rich here. That's not the case at all, but at least it is something. It's certainly better than nothing from cash, plain old green cash, right? Now, the next card that I have is one of these that has a 1% everyday cash back on everything. However, every quarter there is a 5% category. So when these 5% categories come out, I always look at it and think, okay, for this quarter, every time we go to this store or spend money on this thing, we're going to use this one card because it's going to give us 5% back during this one quarter and the categories that are within it. So I hold on to that card, which, by the way, that is like the second credit card I ever had, and I've had it for like 15, 17 years or something. I've had it for a very, very long time. I've had it like maybe even 20 years. I've maybe even had this card for 20 years. I'm not sure how long it's been. I just know it's been a very, very long time. Well over 10, probably even 15 to 20 years I've had this card. So anyway, I like it for that reason, and I do carry that one around with me. Now, I also do have another card as well that is just for miles because, my wife and I, we did enjoy doing a lot of traveling, but we don't really do that a whole lot anymore, unfortunately. But I do like to get points because this one gives actually, I think it's 3% back when it comes back to points and rewards and things like this when it comes to restaurants and hotels and flights and stuff like that. So I like to use this one when we go on flights or book hotels or when we use any money at restaurants, things like this, because ultimately it just captures that extra little bit of a percent back and it gives it back to me in miles that I get to translate into flights someday, right? Well, at least a quarter of a flight, or at least pay down a little bit of the flight anyway. So I like to get that as well. So those are the 3 cards that I use. So you can see here with these examples, I like to maximize the rewards that I'm getting because with all the different purchases that are being made on just regular everyday things anyway, I'm using specific cards on it. So these are some of the reasons why credit cards are maybe a little bit more beneficial than a debit card, because you can really rack up some of these points. Now, another thing that I want to throw out there as well, if you do happen to open up a new credit card, a lot of times, a lot of these cards will have welcome bonuses. In other words, they could range from anywhere between like spend $500 in the first 3 months and get a $200 statement credit, spend $1,000 in the first couple months or the first 3 months and get $250, or spend say $3,000 or $4,000 in the first maybe 3 months and get say $1,000 back. I mean, seriously, it's all over the board. You can find all kinds of welcome bonuses. But the fact of the matter is, you can open up a card like this and you can get all kinds of welcome bonuses, but which actually really kind of escalate your savings back, especially if you're using one of these cards like the first 2 that I talked about. Those 2 alone, if you were to open those 2 cards today, again, you can spend $500 in the first 3 months and get $200 back in a statement credit. So that alone is pretty good. Now, which by the way, this is not a sponsored video, and in fact, I'm not even going to tell you what kind of cards that I have, simply because I'm not going to tell you that just so that you don't have to think that this is a sponsored video. And no, I don't have special links down in the description for these cards at all. I'm just simply telling you this in my own personal example because this is what I do. So anyway, hope that kind of makes sense. But when it comes down to credit cards and debit cards, it all comes down to, like I said, your objective. Do you want to be as financially responsible as you possibly can be? If you do, then I would actually recommend using a debit card. The reason for that is you can only use as much money as you have available to you. If you try to spend a little bit more, they're going to say, nope, sorry, rejected. You don't have enough money in your account. So using a debit card forces you to be financially responsible. Using a credit card, it can be easy to get a little bit carried away. Let's be real. How many of us have used a credit card before and maybe bought a few things that maybe we didn't exactly need because why not? The credit line was there. Let's use it up, right? I know for a fact I've done that more than once, more than 5 times, more than 10 times, probably even more than 50 times, right? I do it all the time. Well, not so much anymore because I'm trying to tame that down a little bit, right? But I know for a fact it's easy to do, to know that, we can just put it on the card and we'll just pay it off some other day. Who cares, right? So it's very easy to do that. So to be most responsible when it comes down to your finances, using a debit card can be very powerful. However, you are giving up some of those rewards, like I talked about, that you could possibly be collecting from a credit card. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, being financially responsible is going to be way more beneficial. You're going to get way further ahead being financially responsible than getting a credit card and getting the points back on money that you probably shouldn't have spent anyway, right? And again, I'm guilty 100% of that all the time. I know that for a fact, have been for a very long time. And it's not like a good trait, right? But again, at the end of the day, still like those rewards. And it can be very captivating to think, if I just spend another $100, I'm going to get another reward, right? You know what I mean? It's like, it's very tempting. And again, that's exactly where that study came in that I talked about earlier, where the person using the credit card, the average consumer uses or spends an extra 12 to 18% just when using a credit card versus actual physical cash. So, wow, right? So anyway, when it comes down to it, there's really no solid answer. It totally depends on you, your financial situation, and of course, your objectives. Do you want to be as most financially responsible as possible, or do you want to maximize your spend and get as much reward back as you possibly can on the money you're going to be spending anyway on the same old goods and services that you're going to buy all the time anyway? Kind of makes sense? So anyway, hope this video gives you a better perspective on credit cards and, of course, debit cards. So anyway, hope this video helps you out. Please make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't done so yet. Share the video with your friends, family, social media, and go back and check out some of the other thousands and thousands of videos right here on the channel. Until next time, thanks so much for watching. Have a nice day, and I'll catch you again later.